Good morning. It is Thursday, September the 6th. This is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. And so I get these emails from cracked.com, and most of them, and cracked.com is like a series of columns. And one of the things you can do also is you can write for cracked.com, and I guess they'll pay you for your whatever you write. So anyways, I came across one that I thought was interesting. It's called 9 Common Pieces of Life Advice That Are Bad and Stupid. So as you know, self-help guru is one of only 3 viable career options in 2018 America. Well, I'm not sure I can spot wisdom when I see it, but I can sure as hell spot it when I don't. So in keeping with cracked tradition, I'll explain why most of the profound advice you see on social media, memes, and bumper stickers is dangerous nonsense. Let me see. The name of this guy is David Wong. He's the author of this particular article. So let's go here. Number 1, treat other people how you want to be treated. Yeah, I'm debunking the golden rule. I don't even give a shit. Quote, treat others how you want to be treated, unquote, works great if you happen to have the exact same values. But guess what? The guy who's always screaming at you the moment he doesn't get his way, he's doing it because that is in fact how he wants to be treated. That's how he thinks human interaction works. This is also the mantra of every puritanical scold. Well, if I was dressed like a whore, I'd want somebody to tell me. So how about we tweak this to figure out how other people want to be treated and go from there. It can get complicated. You know what, friend, that friend you're constantly bailing out of a crisis, I'm going to tell you a secret. It's very possible they like being in a crisis. So anyways, with this particular number 1, it's kind of crap. Because basically what he's saying is suggesting is subjectivism. Everybody has their own life. Everybody has their own world, lives in their own world, and they therefore have their own values. BS. We're all human beings. We all have the same values, the universal values. And we see that on display. We know that because we see it on display each and every day. We're all searching for the same thing. Happiness. Now, whether or not treating other people the way you would want to be treated is the golden rule. Well, supposedly treat others as though you would, as you would have them treat you. The point is that he's wrong when he's saying that, suggesting that this is you should treat people the way. Try to figure out how they want to be treated and treat them that way. And when he's saying Mr. Guy that yells at you at work because he wants to be treated that way. No, he yells at you at work because he believes that might makes right and the ends justify the means. And so he will do whatever he thinks he can get away with. So if you allow Mr. Boorish, obnoxious man to yell at you at work without going and telling his supervisor or filing a complaint with human resources, etc., then you get what you deserve. So, and then figure out how other people want to be treated and go from there. Baloney. We're all human beings, and so it shouldn't be too difficult to figure out how to treat people and how not to. You should be able to figure out that you don't steal from people, you don't rob people, you don't murder people, and you don't do it in large part because you wouldn't want it done to you. I mean, it's just that simple. So he's full of crap when he suggests that everybody has their own values. No, they don't. We all have values in common. Values are universal, or they wouldn't be values. Now, we can have an argument or discussion about what is or isn't a value. He was talking about the puritanical scold and saying, well, if I was dressed like a whore, I would want somebody to tell me type of thing. And so what? You know, if I tell somebody, if I said I was dressed like a bumpkin or I was dressed badly, I would want somebody to tell me. Of course I would. Now, I wouldn't want them to use it as an excuse to be abusive. To walk over, slap me upside the head and say, hey, what the F is wrong with you? When are you going to learn how to dress yourself? That kind of thing. But it wouldn't be bad to have them take me aside and say, you know what? The way you're dressed really isn't appropriate for work. You're dressed like a gigolo. You're dressed like you're out on Saturday night looking for a date. Not appropriate in the workplace. That kind of thing. And also, what I'm looking for from other people is, if you're not my supervisor and I'm dressed like a gigolo, mind your own damn business. Okay, don't worry about it. That's between me and my supervisor. Okay, and that's, so my supervisor wants to pull me inside at work and say, hey, you're dressed inappropriately. Of course, that's his job. But coworkers, shut your mouth, stay out of it, mind your own business. Second one here from his article, be kind. Shit, I'm already realizing that I'm probably not going to get a public speaking tour out of this. My reasoning here is that the world is so short on kindness that when we finally run into it, we tend to be way too forgiving. Don't be so hard on her. She was trying to do the right thing. I'd prefer be kind after coldly deciding what counts for kindness in this situation. So I realize that both too long and too cranky, that's too long and too cranky for a bumper sticker, but lots of the kind people I know are so kind they won't, for example, tell you that your work is lazy trash even when they're sure it is. Their kindness only extends to protecting your feelings in the moment. That's the type of kindness that insists on giving the dog treats, even when it shits on the kitchen counter, ensuring that it never stops doing it. These people are often concerned less about your well-being and more about preserving your feelings toward them. Their kindness is selfish and runs about an inch deep. The last part here is a psychological assessment. And very often people we're trained in our society via American counterculture to issue psychological assessments. We're told, don't judge. So what are we supposed to do instead? Understand. How do you understand? By psychoanalyzing everybody and everything. So the truth is the exact opposite. Don't understand. I'm not a psychoanalyst. And even if I was a psychoanalyst, the person I'm psychoanalyzing needs to be taking tests for me to be able to properly psychoanalyze them. And then even after that, because of the canon of ethics, I couldn't discuss it with anybody anyhow. So do judge. You have to judge. You do it automatically, reflexively, because, again, when we all do it, because we're all looking for the same thing, and that's happiness. And you can't find happiness if you don't judge. Part of the things is you go to school, you're a kid, you go to school and you hang out with the wrong crowd. Guess what? You end up in reform school. You end up getting paddled. You end up getting suspended. You end up getting expelled. You end up getting in trouble with your parents. Okay? And why? Because you exercised poor what? Judgment in terms of who you hung out with. And I know that from personal experience where I would go to school. I was the smallest kid in school, not just in class, in school. And I would hang out with almost anybody. I ended up shoplifting at one particular point because I allowed myself to be pressured into joining a shoplifting gang or shoplifting club. And that was what it was called. They called it a club. But anyways, so I did that and then got caught, and it was a big disaster. And again, if I had been able just to exercise good judgment and say, this person sucks, and what they're suggesting sucks, and no, I'm not going to do it, I would have saved myself a lot of grief. Okay? And the same thing goes for adults. Do you want to end up in prison? Then you better learn how to judge. Let's see. And what else is what other mistakes that he's here? Too long, too cranky for bumper stickers because he is too long and too cranky. Be kind after coldly deciding what counts for kindness. And again, he's subjectivizing. Kindness is a universal value. Universal. It applies to everyone, everywhere, forever, all times. It applied 2,000 years ago. It'll apply 2,000 years from now. If you don't understand what being kind means, then you're not long for freedom. You're probably going to end up in prison at some point in your life, maybe even getting the death penalty. Okay, let's see. Number 3, listening makes all the difference. Here's an example why this advice is bullshit. The average person who says they're a vegetarian actually eats about 1 serving of meat a day. Let's see. Okay, so blah, blah. He goes on with that about what hypocrites vegetarians are and vegans, and that they eventually go on to eat meat. They quit veganism, they quit vegetarianism, and they go on to eat meat. Okay, sure, listening definitely matters. What most people want is for you to listen to them, even though they don't actually do anything to help. Even if you don't actually do anything to help. But if you want to understand others and thus navigate this scary world of ours, the rule should be carefully watching what people do makes all the difference. See, then you'll understand why they're lying. It's not always bad. The people lying about their meat consumption figure it still helps to promote the cause, even if they themselves can't live up to it. Christians do the same. The asshole at work who rages at you when you offer criticism, watch carefully. More often than not, they'll quietly change their habits in response to what you said. The "how dare you question me" bullshit is just insecure posturing, and that's never the part that matters. Okay, so let's see. Carefully watching what people do makes all the difference as opposed to listening. Listening helps, and listening is good, but the thing is, you still have to make judgments. If you indiscriminately listen, and I've always, and I've had tendency to do this because somewhere along the line I thought that the secret to being a popular guy was just to be a good listener. And what you end up doing is surrounding yourself with bores. Okay? You end up surrounding yourself with boring people that want to talk all the time and never shut up. Okay? They love you. And boy, they want to call you on the phone. They want to come over to your house. They want to stop you in the hallways at work. So it's a good idea to listen carefully without a doubt. But you also got to know what it is you're listening for. If you're just an indiscriminately and patient listener, again, you're going to end up surrounding yourself with a lot of boring people. When you do listen, again, you got to know what it is that you're listening for. And so, like in conversations with people, there's a lot of people that want to be manipulative, and they want to use psychological tools and tactics and techniques in order to do that. And if you're unaware, you're blissfully unaware, then you're going to be taken advantage of. If you're truly listening and looking for this, which means looking for what they're doing, trying to find out what it is that they want or what they're doing, then you're going to be able to avoid that kind of situation where you end up getting manipulated or bullied or intimidated into doing something you don't want to do. The other part here, he's saying it's a scary world. And no, it isn't. It's a benevolent universe. The success is to be expected. Things can be known with certainty. They are known with certainty. And the only reason it seems like a scary world is because too many people play up the idea of all the negatives. You know, go to the newspaper and spend their time dwelling on those things that are negative. And it's one of the things that can confirm for you that it is a benevolent universe is the fact that what's news is the negative stuff. Okay? If it was... And people say, why don't you do good news? Why don't you tell what's the positive things that are going on? And the news person will always say, because that's not news. Because that's what's happening all the time anyhow. News is what's new and rare. And it's the negative stuff that's actually fairly rare. Okay. Then, to take it from the other side, number 4, speak from the heart. I guess it just means be honest. And no, my counter isn't lying can fix almost any problem, even though that happens to be true. No, my better advice is learn to read the goddamn room, people. It doesn't matter what you say at all. What matters is what the other person hears. People aren't robots, and all words are filtered through a thick layer of mood and context. If someone's convinced you're out to get them, then literally any criticism, no matter logical and carefully explained, will be heard as "you suck, I rule, I'm establishing my dominance over you." If the other person thinks you're incredibly attractive, the only information they'll retain from your exchange is "my crush noticed me." If you speak honestly, openly, and clearly, the other person reacts badly because you didn't take 5 seconds to first consider their state of mind. That's on you. No, wrong. Again, life is not inherently psychological in nature. It would be if it was true that everybody lived in their own little world, but they don't. We all live in the world on the planet Earth, in a world in common, and we inhabit certain spaces in common, work, home, etc. And we're all human beings. So we have certain things that are in common, and so we don't have to consider the state of mind. You're honest because, in part, because you establish a reputation. And if you have a reputation of being dishonest, it is going to be very quickly when people are just going to tune you out. Every time you open your mouth, they're just going to say, oh, okay, whatever, and walk away. You are going to cease to have any influence over anybody. People are not going to listen to you, and for all intents and purposes, you are going to be isolated. You may be surrounded by a room full of people, but you're going to feel like you're the only person in the room, and that's because you're a liar. Quit being a liar, and you're going to feel, honesty is a way you make connections with people. And by lying all the time, you're putting up a barrier. You're putting up a barrier between you and other folks. Now, if that's, I suppose, what you're doing deliberately, that's one thing. But in certain situations, you need or want some privacy and you're finding a difficult time getting it, perhaps lying will help you to achieve that. Which is the other part of this little segment of his article is, again, he's suggesting that the ends justify the means, might makes right. Bullshit. It doesn't. Ever. We get a lot of cues from social media, from movies, television, that say otherwise. For instance, Breaking Bad, Burn Notice, programs like that say the ends justify the means. No, they don't. Okay, Breaking Bad, everybody in that movie was an asshole, with the exception of the infant. The only person in that whole show that wasn't a jerk that I would spend 5 minutes with, the only character, was the infant, their little baby daughter. Everybody else in there was a jerk. The second one, I suppose, was the son that had cerebral palsy, maybe, but everybody else was a dick, an asshole, a bitch. Everybody else was scheming, was playing the ends justify the means, might makes right in that show, and so there you go. Like I said, I wouldn't want to hang out with any of them. Number 5, follow your passion. This career advice is pointing out something that's definitely true. If you aren't passionate about your work, it's hard to muster the energy to be really good at it. Note, being really good at something takes a fuckload of energy. Why more than you think? Way more than you think. But the reason most people who follow their passion never arrive at their passion is that the advice is incomplete to the point of being wrong. A better version, follow your pain. Wow, I can hardly wait to read this one. That is, figure out what costs you're willing to accept to do the thing you're thinking about doing. If you're passionate about writing poetry, then you have to realize that it pays shit and ask yourself if you're willing to accept the pain of poverty in order to be a poet. If so, go for it. There are other forms of wealth in life. Otherwise, you're going to be tying yourself in knots trying to always have it both ways, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Learning lessons was a hard road for me. Specifically, I had to read this article giving me this very advice, and then I thought, I'm going to share that with people. Number 6, stop and smell the roses. Now, let me critique this one. What you do is you do what you're good at. Find out what it is that you're good at, and that's what you're going to do. Another way of looking at it is, what has God called you to do? If you're a Christian, that's what you do. You got to figure out what is it God has called you to do, and go do it. This whole idea of follow your heart, find out what it is you love, and go do it is crap. It's just pure crap. It's socialist nonsense. So, and then his, what was his rejoinder? Follow your pain? You got to be kidding. And then, let's see, if you're passionate about something for a living, you have to realize it pays shit, and ask yourself if you're willing to accept the pain of poverty. Baloney. What a bunch of crap. Let's see here. 6, stop and smell the roses. This advice is popular among middle-aged professionals who are afraid that in the course of pursuing their careers, they forgot to raise their children. I don't think it's a big problem right now for most of you. My alternative, practice delaying gratification. That's not a bad piece of advice, really. Whether your goal is to be a hedge fund millionaire, to play banjo on a street corner, it all really boils down to one skill: the ability to decline short-term pleasure in exchange for greater, longer-term pleasure. And then it goes on, but I'm not going to bother with it. I think that basically sums it up. And actually, this is the first one he's gotten right. Number 7, don't let the haters get you down. We live in a magical era, really, when you can post a picture of your dog on Reddit and within 5 comments have someone say they hope your dog dies, that you die, that racism is very good. It's true that you're trying to function in such an environment means being able to tune out shitheads, but what you don't realize is shitheads were themselves once like you. So, in other words, we're all shitheads. When you encounter a shithead, you usually encounter somebody who's bristling with defense mechanisms. Here we go with the psychoanalysis again, and the rest of it's not even worth reading. So, psychoanalytic bullshit. Instead, he's saying we should get a clear sense of what you should and shouldn't be ashamed of. So earlier in the article, he's saying we shouldn't have any values because it's all relative. And now he's coming out and claiming that there are values after all. Get a sense of, because that's, if you're going to be ashamed of things, that means that you do have a sense of values. So, see what else. Number 8, what matters is what's in your heart. This is a case in which people misinterpret the intentions of the original author of the phrase. Whatever. He says that the original author of the phrase is a copywriter at Newark Refrigerator Magnet Solutions, who oddly enough later turned out to be the infamous serial killer known as the Jersey Cannibal. I'm sure it's supposed to mean that it doesn't matter how poor or ugly someone is. What matters is their character. Well, it is the idea that you don't judge them by the outside, you judge them by who they are. Unfortunately, how people actually live this advice boils down to what matters isn't what I do, but how I feel about it. True. That's what the left wants you to do, is to consider, because the left is materialistic. And the left is saying, forget about being conceptual and abstract, forget about things like justice, and concentrate on those things that you can touch and feel. And your feelings are something that you can feel. And that those are the things that are most important, and that abstractions like reality and knowledge and things like that just don't matter. Let's see, where's number 9? There it is. Results are all that matter. Allow me to present the single most damaging yet almost universally believed piece of advice in the world. This is the bullshit spouted by every loose cannon cop on TV who violates all the rules but still gets the bad guy. And that's what I'm saying, is that we get this from the American counterculture. The left in our country says that might makes right, the ends justify the means, and does so because they believe that it is possible to have utopia on Earth, a socialist utopia. And they believe further that it doesn't matter how we get there. It doesn't matter how many people have to die or go insane in the process of getting to this utopia, because once we get there, it'll all be worth it. In other words, the ends justify the means. No, they don't. And there's no utopia anyhow. All right, see what number 10 is here. Take pleasure in mastering the process regardless of the results, whatever. Mastered process is faster progress. Do we have a number 10 here? It's got to be in here somewhere. Maybe that was known. Results are all that matter. 9, continue reading below. Where's number 10? Yep. Well, it didn't... it was only 9 common pieces of life advice that are bad and stupid. So that was the end of it. So most of it was, this is a guy who's clearly influenced by American counterculture, which is easy to do. Most of us are, to one degree or another. I am doing, and I have been, but I'm doing the best I can to remove those influences and get back to sanity. So, because a lot of the things in those 9, several of them were contradictory. Most of it was psychoanalytic bullshit. And, so anyways, I'm going to go on with, what are we going to be doing here? So I'm going to be reading from House, the philosophy of House, and the philosophy of, not Burn Notice, but Breaking Bad. That's right, when I come back. And thank you very much. We're back. I'm going to start with philosophy and house. And let me see. It says number 3, hi. Hi there. Is a chapter name. Is there, a Superman in the House, a Nietzschean point of view for House. And House, this is a series called Philosophy and Philosophy in the Simpsons, Philosophy in House, Philosophy in various types of pop culture television shows and whatnot. And it's showing how philosophy influences our culture and therefore influences our lives. And this is chapter 3, dealing with Nietzsche, because basically every chapter is dealing with another philosopher. Last chapter was dealing with the existential philosopher Sartre, French existential philosopher Sartre, who said, hell is other people. How about that? Okay, so this is by David Goldblatt. I teach you the Übermensch. Man is something that should be overcome. What have you done to overcome him? That's from Nietzsche's Zarathustra. To Nietzsche, these Übermenschen appear as symbols of the repudiation of any conformity to a single norm, antithesis to mediocrity and stagnation. Walter Kaufmann. Had their paths ever crossed, Friedrich Nietzsche, 1844 to 1900, might well have become a patient of Dr. Gregory House. Nietzsche suffered from a mixture of undiagnosed diseases and bouts of depression throughout his life. Just the kind of unusual case House handles week after week at the fictional Princeton Plainsboro Teaching Hospital. Nietzsche's symptoms and ailments include severe migraines, exacerbated by extreme eye strain, painful nausea, colic, diphtheria, and dysentery, haunting him virtually his entire life. These maladies intensified during his debilitated years, 1874 to 1876, and culminated in a literal collapse, forcing him to leave his teaching position. Nietzsche writes at this time, I could no longer doubt that I am suffering from a serious brain illness and that my eyes and stomach only suffered as a result of this central process. 10 years before his death in 1900, Nietzsche lapsed into an undefined madness from which he did not recover. Now, I like to emphasize that because you hear people quote Nietzsche who says in one of his books that which does not kill me makes me stronger. Well, it damn sure didn't in Nietzsche's case, did it? Okay, the madness didn't kill him, but it sure as hell didn't make him stronger. Neither did the colic, the dysentery, diphtheria, or anything else he suffered from. Nietzsche may be most famous for his controversial concept of the Übermensch, translated as Superman or Overman, a figure of great achievement, but, more important, of noble or superior character, self-assured with a will to overcome a conforming and constricting gravity of custom and morality. Does this sound like our Dr. House? Could he be an example of what Nietzsche had in mind? And again, Nietzsche, everybody credits Nietzsche with being a philosopher, and he wasn't. He was a philologist. He studied old manuscripts. That was his job. He worked as a professor in a university and studied and translated old manuscript. Also, the only reason that we've even heard of Nietzsche was because of his friends. Nietzsche wrote some novels. He was a novelist, by the way. He didn't come out and write any nonfiction philosophical treatises, or whatever, however you pronounce it. He wrote novels, fiction. Thus Spake Zarathustra and works of that sort were all fictional works from which his friends teased various philosophical points that they assumed that Nietzsche was trying to make. Now, considering the fact that he was he was mentally ill for most of his life, and for the last 10 years of his life, he was confined to a mental institution. He was institutionalized for the last 10 years of his life. It's rather doubtful that I think that he was trying to make any particular philosophical point, and that he was just, these were just his musings, perhaps expressions of his mental illness. So, but again, it was his friends. His writings didn't come to anybody's attention until his friends started to promote his works. So, very dubious as far as I'm concerned as a philosopher and should be rather uninfluential in terms of intellect, what he has to offer in terms of the intellectual. Most of what he's talking about is, again, psychological in nature. This was a time in German history and philosophic history, just right around the time when psychology was being discovered, and a lot of people who were given credit for being philosophers were really amateur sociologists or psychologists. And if you look at some of the, Hegel's that way, Nietzsche's that way, and Kant is that way, that it has a tendency to be more manipulative than informative. And also what people like Kant and Hegel used to do was take 2,000 years worth of intellectual history, Aristotle, Plato, etc., and Thomas Aquinas, and throw it in the trash. And that was courtesy of Descartes, who was the first one to do this. He decided, that Thomas Aquinas and his teachings were too restrictive, and so he's just going to throw it away, and he's going to start all over again. And you'll see a lot of people that do that. And they'll a lot of philosophers and a lot of non-philosophers that do that. They'll start with the question, how do we fix this problem? Well, the first way to answer that is ask, how have we been fixing this problem? And what's wrong with the way we're fixing this problem? What do we do about X? Well, what have we been doing about X? And what's wrong with it? Okay, because what you're suggesting may not be a problem at all. You're just skipping, you're trying to put your own spin or your own label or advance your own agenda at everyone else's expense. But anyways, that's what Descartes did, and everybody else just kind of followed suit. So Descartes throws everything in the garbage, and he starts over. Then Hegel comes along. He throws Descartes and everything else in the garbage. He starts all over, and pretty soon everything is a psychological and sociological mess. So, and mess is a good way to describe Nietzsche. But that's House and Philosophy. And let's see, next one is going to be, who is it? Where is it? Oh, there it is. Breaking Bad and Philosophy when I come back. Okay, thank you very much. And so where we left this off with Walter is that they were talking about Walter, what's his name, Winchell or something like that. Walter, the main character in Breaking Bad, and that he was responsible for a lot of deaths. And they said that there's 8 people that he's directly responsible for killing. And the last one we dealt with was Emilio. Although, because they gassed him, basically. Used phosphine gas, gassed him and kill him. And Crazy 8 also succumbed to the gas but didn't die. So, now that's where we're at, is the death of Crazy 8. Walt had intended to kill Crazy 8 with Emilio with the phosphine gas in the RV. His and Jesse's safe escape and future safety could only have been guaranteed by successfully eliminating both on the spot. Unfortunately, Walt failed to kill both immediately, and the job of finishing Crazy 8 was left for later. The immediacy of self-defense no longer existed, as Crazy 8 was bound in Jesse's basement, slowly recovering from the phosphine poisoning. Imprisoned, immobile, and slowly regaining consciousness and strength, Crazy 8's fate is clearly to die, and the killer is determined by a coin toss, which Walt loses. At this point, the nature of any excuse is considerably different than in the case of Emilio. Walt is agonized by his duty to kill Crazy 8, so much so that he resorts to making a list of pros and cons, either to help, make, or to justify his decision. The final, overpowering rationale that convinces him as a single pro that Crazy 8 will kill Walt and his family if Walt doesn't kill him. This outweighs the morality of killing in itself. Ultimately, Walt remains unable to kill Crazy 8, striking up conversations with him, getting to know him a bit, and sympathizing with him. The process apparently makes it harder for him to follow through with the killing, and he's on the verge finally of letting Crazy 8 go. Walt finally realizes he must follow through when a knife-shaped shard of plate Walter breaks accidentally while feeding Crazy 8. A sandwich goes missing. Wait a minute here. Walt finally realizes he must follow through when a knife-shaped shard of plate Walter breaks accidentally while feeding Crazy 8. A sandwich goes missing. Crazy 8 intends to kill Walt once freed. Walt has nearly been tricked, and he brutally chokes Crazy 8 in a final confrontation, sustaining a stab wound in the process. Arguably, Walt's actions now amount to valid self-defense, but his moral blameworthiness for killing Crazy 8 seems greater than for Emilio. What accounts for this distinction? Crazy 8's captivity seems to alter Walt's moral responsibility for his killing. While Walt tried to kill them both under a clear situation of self-defense, it's harder to claim self-defense against a captive. Walt's choice is clearly different in Crazy 8's death. He had time to deliberate and has options. He could contact the authorities and confess. His crimes at this stage are significantly more minimal than the murder of Crazy 8. Killing Emilio would have likely been seen as justified or excusable legally. By choosing to kill an imprisoned and immobilized victim, Walt has taken on an extra degree of moral guilt. He's the direct cause of Crazy 8's demise. He has other options. He intends the death and lacks any immediate excuse or justification. While not cold-blooded murder given Crazy 8's intent and attempt to kill Walt, Walt's killing of Crazy 8 is certainly more morally blameworthy than that of Emilio. He had less morally problematic alternatives available and chose not to pursue them. He took the path less taken and descended further into the depths of his ultimate moral degradation, starkly illustrated in the deeply troubling circumstances surrounding the death of Jane in Season 2. So I like this because, again, it deals with ethics. And if you're dealing with ethics, then you're dealing with certainty of knowledge. And when you're dealing with certainty of knowledge, you're dealing with reality. All things that the left in this country says doesn't exist. So I think if you get a chance to read any of these, Breaking Bad and Philosophy, or any of the other books that are dealing with philosophy and popular culture, such as The Simpsons and philosophy, I'd recommend that you pick it up and read it. They also have now a psychology series, which is probably a little bit more appropriate, given that a lot of what you're seeing on television and in the movies are psychodramas, psychologistic manipulations of the characters and of the people that are watching the shows. So that would be an excellent thing to read as well. So, but that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. I thank you for listening, and until next time, have a great day.